Many people know that here at Spadina Station there used to be a moving walkway connecting the two halves of the station, especially because you can still see some traces of it in the tiles on the wall, and up until just a few years ago, the tiles on the floor used to be different where the moving walkway was. But did you know that was not the only moving walkway in our subway system? I talked about the moving walkway here at Spadina in my video about how Spadina was originally intended to be two separate stations. There's a magic link up here, and I'll put a link down in the description so you can find it when you finish watching this video. But while this one was intended to be permanent, there was another one at Keele that was only ever intended to be temporary. Let's go have a look. When the first phase of the Bloor-Danforth subway line opened in 1966, Keele was temporarily the west end of the subway line. The subway had replaced a streetcar line that ran along Bloor Street, but because the subway ended here, streetcars were still needed farther west from here. Today's bus bay is in the place where there was a trolley bus loop originally at the west end of the station, and because trolley buses and streetcars use different overhead wire, there was a separate streetcar loop here at the east end. And there was a moving walkway to carry passengers up from the streetcar loop to the eastbound subway platform. In 1968, when the extension west to Islington opened, the streetcars were no longer needed. The loop was no longer in service, and the moving walkway was walled off. You can see, if you look closely, on the tiles at the edge of the platform where it used to be, because they don't quite match the originals. Today, no trace of the streetcar loop remains, and in fact, much of it is covered by the new buildings that have been put up over there. Interesting trivia note, because the streetcar loop and the trolley bus loop are at opposite ends of the station, a passenger who needed to transfer from one to the other had to walk all the way down the length of the platform. There was a similar situation here at Woodbine, which was temporarily the eastern end of the subway line until the extension to Warden opened a couple of years later. Immediately east of the bus loop, which still exists, there was a streetcar loop serving the streetcars heading east from here. There was no moving walkway here though, just a set of stairs leading down to the concourse level where a passageway connected to the rest of the station. After the streetcars were no longer in use, that passageway was blocked off and converted into a TTC staff break room and a storage area. There's still traces of the streetcar loop though. There are still tracks embedded in the road here on Strathmore Boulevard, immediately north of the station, over half a century after this streetcar loop went out of service. You might have noticed something in the aerial photos of those two stations. They're both north of the street, and that's true of almost the entirety of Line 2. Of course, at the ends, it bends. On the east end, it bends to the northeast beyond about Main Street Station, and on the west end, it bends southwest, approaching Kipling. And of course, it runs directly under Bloor on the Prince Edward Viaduct across the Don Valley. I did a video about that viaduct, links in the usual places. But other than that, almost the entire line runs parallel to the street and about 50 to 100 meters north, avoiding the need to dig up about 20 kilometers of a major arterial road to build the subway. In some places, like near our last stop on Strathmore Boulevard, it runs under a minor street. In others, it runs under a lane or a parking lot, like here at Ossington. And in fact, the entire Line 2, other than Kipling, is north of the street with one exception. Sherburne Station is on the south side of the street because the bends in Bloor Street around that area are too sharp for the subway, and also on the north side of the street, the Rosedale Ravine is extremely close to the street. The signals on Line 1 were replaced with a brand new system several years ago. It's much more modern than the old one. But Lines 2 and 4 still use basically the same old system that Line 1 originally used when it opened in 1954. I talked about what those signals mean and how they work in my video about the Russell Hill subway crash. You know where to find the links. So, how does the signaling system on line 1 work? Well, it's a much more sophisticated system than the old one, yet the trackside signals are much simpler, just one light, whereas on the old system a lot of the signals had multiple lights. But most of the signaling information is actually transmitted electronically to the train, where it's used to control the train and to display detailed signaling information in the driver's cab. Now, what I'm about to tell you is not really what they mean, but here's a quick cheat sheet for passengers who want to know, when's my train coming? If the light is red, that means you missed the last one and it might be a while until the next one comes. If it's solid yellow, that means that the train's on its way, but it's probably still a few minutes away. And if the light is flashing green, that means the train's getting closer. It's probably going to arrive in the next minute or two. There's another one, flashing yellow, that you won't see very often because it means that the next switch is set away from the main track.
At the end of some platforms, or if you've sat in the railfan seat at the front of the train, you might have noticed signs with the letters S, P, or O. What do they mean? They tell the driver how much oomph to use at that location. S and P actually go back to the older vehicles where the driver could switch between having the motors connected in series or in parallel. It's a bit like changing gears on your bike. S is like being in low gear, lots of torque to get you started, but you can't go very quickly. P is like being in high gear, not so much torque, so it's not good for starting from a stop, but you can hit top speed. The controls in the newer vehicles don't work that way, but the signs have stuck around, and if you think of the signs as meaning slow and power instead of series and parallel, they still tell the driver what to do. And O? That's off, as in shut off the power to the motors and just coast. Speaking of signs you can see from the railfan seat, have you noticed that there's a pair of signs that say 6 as you pull into each station? The second one of the pair indicates where to stop, so it's always near the end of the platform, while the first one indicates where to start braking, and the location of that one varies. Sometimes, like here at Keele, it's partway down the platform. In other locations, it's somewhere back in the tunnel on the approach to the station. Why? Just like in a car, if you're stopping somewhere with a higher speed limit or on a downhill grade, you need to start braking sooner. But why does the number 6 mean stop? Because it's a 6-car train. When the subway first opened in 1954, it used shorter vehicles than today, and a full train was 8 cars, but they ran shorter trains when demand was lower. Ever since the second generation of subway vehicles, the Montreal series or M1 cars that were bought in preparation for extending the subway up University Avenue in the 1960s, the vehicles have been approximately the same 75-foot length as today, and a full-length train has been 6 cars. But they continued running shorter trains at times of lower demand. Until just a few decades ago, some trains were only 4 cars long, and there used to be 2 pairs of signs, one pair with the number 4 and another pair with the number 6. And yes, since Line 4 Shepherd uses 4-car trains, that line's signs display the number 4.
In my video about the color patterns of the tiles in subway stations, yada yada yada, I mentioned that some of the ones here at Christie don't match because of a fire on a train in 1976. That was a case of arson, and it not only destroyed 4 subway cars, it did some damage to the station as well. When they replaced the tiles, the main tiles almost match, but the strip of color along the top doesn't match at all. But that wasn't the only fire on a train in a subway station in Toronto. Toronto used to move garbage out of subway stations on special garbage trains, and in 2000, one of those trains caught fire up in the tunnel approaching Old Mill Station. The operator of the train drove it out onto the end of the station over the Humber River so that it wouldn't fill the tunnels with smoke any more than possible, and so that it would be easier for fire services to get there and put it out. The vehicle that the fire happened in was completely destroyed and its partner was damaged, but the crew was okay. And while the station took some damage, it wasn't serious and it opened a few days later. After that, the TTC decided it was just too dangerous to move garbage through the system on trains. So now the garbage is put out and picked up at curbside by trucks, just like everyone else's. The TTC used a number of different garbage vehicles over the years. One of them was purpose-built. It was nicknamed Tokyo Rose. Tokyo because it was Japanese, and Rose as an ironic reference to its fragrant cargo. But the rest of them were all converted from vehicles that had carried passengers for the TTC. The very first one was a converted streetcar, because we had lots of streetcars, and we didn't need as many of them once the subway started replacing streetcar lines. The remainder of them, including the two that were involved in the fire here at Old Mill, were converted subway cars. And there's something similar with the TTC's fleet of work cars. A number of those are purpose-built, but many of them are converted former passenger vehicles that had reached the end of their lives carrying passengers. In fact, the one vehicle that survived the fire here at Old Mill was subsequently converted again into a work car. If you look out at Davisville Yard as you go by on the subway, you can often see some of these vehicles parked in the yard there. Some of them pretty much resemble their former selves, while others have been stripped down to flat cars and often have additional equipment mounted on them for maintenance. Well, I hope you enjoyed learning some things about the TTC. If you did, you know what to do. Please like and subscribe.